We're here with Florence MacDonald, the Liberal Democrat candidate for Camborne, Hale and Redruth. Hi, Florence.
Hello.
What's your key policy?
Well, our one key policy would be to stop Brexit, because we know that how we move forward with that is going to affect every other area of our society and our policies.
Fantastic. So I just want to touch on the stopping Brexit policy. There's been a bit of confusion about it. The Lib Dems came out very unambiguously to revoke Article 50 a few months ago, and it's still in your manifesto. But a week or two ago, your deputy leader, Ed Davey, went on Sky News and said that you'd be pushing for a people's vote again. So what is the Lib Dems policy?
So we have never stopped pushing for a people's vote. We've been doing that for a long time. The revoke Article 50 was a commitment that if we were elected as a majority government, that would be such a huge commitment from the electorate to go from 20 MPs to a majority, that in that scenario we would revoke Article 50. And I don't think we could do anything else, because our policies are pro-EU, our stance and our beliefs are pro-EU, and we would have to follow through with that. But in the likelihood that we have, we're not a majority government, we will continue campaigning for a people's vote.
Okay, well, doesn't the fact that you want to remain, you want to revoke Article 50 if you get in, but then if you don't get in, you won't see that as a loss, you'll just carry on going for a people's vote. Doesn't that show that a people's vote is just remaining by the back door? It's designed to get people to remain.
I don't think so at all. We couldn't revoke Article 50 if we weren't in a majority government. That wouldn't be an option. So then we will always campaign in the best way possible to remain in the EU. That is our commitment. And if we weren't a majority government, the best possible way we could do that would be through a people's vote.
So if there was this people's vote, you campaign for it, you get it, and the vote comes back to leave again, would you respect that result?
If we campaigned for people's vote, there was people's vote, and it was leave again, yes, I would.
So then, if you were elected as a Liberal Democrat MP, would you vote for any form of Brexit deal?
I would. Well, it would completely depend what that second referendum was on. So if a second referendum was on a particular deal and remain, then it's really difficult, isn't it? If we were in a minority government, if we were the minority or the opposition, and the deal was one that was really damaging for this country, I don't think I could support that. I don't think I could vote for that. But again, if we are in opposition as a smaller group in Parliament, that wouldn't stop that from going through. Does that make sense?
The Lib Dems see pretty much any Brexit deal as a damaging deal.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you'd accept the result, but you wouldn't do anything to facilitate it in Parliament?
Yeah, I get that is tricky. You're right. And the truth is, I'm not sure exactly what that situation would be, and it's hard for me to say explicitly, this is what I would do. I know that I think we're better remaining, but I also know that there are some scenarios that are worse than others. So a Brexit no deal would be extremely damaging. Some form of deals, Boris Johnson's deal, is more damaging than Theresa May's.
What this sounds like to voters is that whether or not, however many times we vote to leave, however many deals are put forward, groups like the Lib Dems, probably other parties in Parliament as well, will never allow it to happen. So
never allow? How can we never allow?
Prevent it by voting it down in Parliament.
But that's not necessarily preventing it. That's not supporting it. We
But
can't.
it prevents it.
If we're not in a position to allow it, if we're not in that majority government, then that's not what we're doing. But there are deals that I think I wouldn't be able to support.
Are there any deals you think you would be able to support?
If there was a strong feeling from the public,
surely 2 referendum votes to leave is a strong feeling.
I mean, I don't think 52% is a strong feeling. I don't think our referendums should be done on a 50% threshold. I don't think that's correct, especially on major constitutional change. I mean, it's such a complex issue. It really is.
So you don't think that major constitutional change should be approved on 50%?
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Major constitutional change could be approved under a Lib Dem majority government on a vote of 30% or 40%.
Well, we want voting reform, and we have said that all along, but the system that we have right now, this first past the post system, that is the way it works, and we would love to change that. It would be really great if other parties could get on board with that, such as the Labour Party, and they're not. So we're working with the system that we have, and I think that a move from 20 MPs to over 300 MPs, that is a huge change of opinion in the public.
Okay, I want to move on to then the wider election. So, first of all, why should people vote Liberal Democrat? Are they, not just a bit of Labour policy mixed with a bit of Green policy mixed with a bit of Tory policy? And Labour and Green already want a second referendum, which most polling shows would be Remain anyway. So why not vote for someone like Labour who would get in? Okay,
so first of all, you're making that sound like it's a bad thing to be a mixture of those groups, whereas actually maybe we are the best part of all those different groups and taking the best bits of those policies. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I wouldn't trust Labour on Remain at all. You look at their record on a people's vote, and they have consistently, at every opportunity, voted against it or voted to abstain. We know that Corbyn has spoken critically of the EU and favoured leave at certain points in different speeches. Our own candidate here has supported, let's get it done, let's leave. So, I don't think we are the same as other parties or their position on Brexit at all. I think we have really fantastic policies that are both responsible and fair and are aimed to support people in society and to give everyone the opportunity to succeed in different ways, because we are all different, and that's partly what that liberal aspect is about.
Okay, well, I want to move on to healthcare. Your leader, Jo Swinson, has been very critical of the way the Tory government has handled the NHS, particularly mental health, and there's a lot in the manifesto about boosting funding for that. But didn't Jo Swinson vote for the austerity measures which have hurt the NHS?
So there's a lot of criticism of Jo Swinson and her entire voting record, and I think that we just need a bit of realism of the situation, which is if we were in a coalition, which we committed to doing, and you're a minister in that coalition, then you have to vote with the government, otherwise you have to step down as minister, at which point you're not doing any good. So by being there, we were trying to have a positive influence. There's no doubt that things happened that were not good, and I would not support. The worst of those things happened after 2015. So youth services being cut by 40% was after 2015. 20,000 police being cut was after 2015. So it's hard to judge her on a voting record when, in a sense, her hands were tied. It's not really a fair reflection of Jo Swinson. The reality is we were the minority part of a coalition, so that government is not going to be reflective of all Liberal Democrats' policies.
Well, a lot of people don't trust Jo Swinson and don't trust the Lib Dems over what they felt they had to vote for in that coalition. And you say her hands were tied as a minister. She could have always resigned if she felt so strongly about cutting the NHS or cutting mental health services, which she clearly does in this manifesto.
Yeah.
If she felt so strongly about that, she could resign. Why didn't she?
Well, you'd also be sacrificing the ability to do good, and I think that there was good done in that coalition. I think it was a really difficult situation. And
what good did Jo Swinson do in that coalition? Can you point to anything particular?
So we did a lot of fantastic green policies. We quadrupled...
Jo Swinson particularly?
I couldn't give you a specific Jo Swinson example, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, and I would love to get back to you on that.
Okay. Also, if all the money in your manifesto from the income tax rise for 1 penny in the pound, which you say will raise about 7 billion, if all that is ring-fenced to the NHS, how do you propose to pay for your other policies, green policies, etc.?
Really good example. So we've got £130 billion that's going towards capital investment towards infrastructure. A lot of that is going to come from borrowing because we have historically low interest rates at the moment. And then there's other money coming from different areas. So, for example, yes, the corporate tax would go up to 20%. We would get rid of the separate capital gains tax. We would reduce numbers in prisons by reducing shorter prison sentences. We would raise money through an aviation tax that would go towards the environment and transport. There's lots and lots of different ways in which we'd be raising other income.
How much are you planning on borrowing?
That's the 130 billion pounds of infrastructure, capital gains, that's the borrowed money.
130 billion pounds
for capital investment.
That's more than the Greens are planning on borrowing.
Over what? No, they are borrowing 94 billion a year for over a 10-year period. We're talking about parliamentary.
So in 1 year you're borrowing 130 billion?
No, for the next parliamentary term. So
across 5 years?
Yeah, 24, 25.
Okay, right. I just want to go back to Jo Swinson as well. If I mean, you said it's not very likely that the Lib Dems would get a majority government, but if they did, as Prime Minister, how would Jo Swinson be on things like foreign policy and domestic policy? Because she's voted for things like airstrikes in Iraq. She's voted against a requirement to have a UN vote on intervention in Syria, while her own manifesto says that she wants to champion the liberal rules-based international order which provides a strong basis for multilateral action, and yet she's completely defied that in her voting. She's voted against using public money to guarantee young people jobs. So what can we expect from her as a
Are we talking about
PM?
coalition again? I mean, I think it's really, I will repeat again, I think it's really important that I don't think that the coalition is a fair reflection on Jo Swinson or her policies. Our manifesto is. Our policy is really clear that action should only be taken, military action should only be taken if there is a vote on it and if there is clear legal support for that. We also have a really great foreign policy that is about a lot focused around climate and encouraging other areas and other countries and supporting developing countries to move towards renewable power. A lot to do with empowering women as well, and not having a foreign policy that ignores the status of women in favour of trade deals and financial gain. So, I really support our manifesto's foreign policy.
Well, it's fine having a manifesto that supports the status of women in the international sphere, but if you then also vote to bomb them without a UN vote, that's not really up to scratch, is it? So
I don't think we have said we will do that.
But would Jo Swinson vote for that sort of stuff again?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, that's fine then. I want to touch on the Remain alliance as well.
Yep.
So between the Greens and the Lib Dems on a national level.
And Plaid Cymru as well.
And Plaid Cymru, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, of course. But specifically here, the Greens and the Lib Dems, because we're in Cornwall, which is in England.
Yeah.
So both Green and Lib Dem are standing in your constituency. So what happened there? Why did you not think that it would be advantageous?
So deals aren't made at the level where I go and chat to the Green candidate and we do it between us. They're done much, much higher up, and they're looking at the broad picture, and they come to an agreement of where they think they can and are willing to stand people down. So it's not really such a case of, we just get together and decide. I'm really pleased that there is a Remain alliance, and I hope that that's going to have a positive impact. But I would defend everybody's right to stand a candidate in this election. We're parties because we don't all have the same views. We do have some common ground, particularly on Brexit, and that's where this Remain alliance has come from. But the Green candidates have every right to stand in Cornwall, as do I as well.
But are you not worried that between you, you'll split the Remain vote in this constituency?
For me, everybody has their own right to make their own vote. It's not my choice to decide for them who they should and shouldn't be allowed to vote for. I will keep championing my policies, why I'm standing for the Lib Dems, why I want to be the MP for this constituency, and I hope that I will persuade people to vote for me. It's the Green Party's right to do exactly the same thing. A deal has been made in the UK. It's not here in Cornwall.
I accept they have a right to stand a candidate,
Yeah.
but if you two are both splitting the vote for the Remain side, isn't it vote Lib Dem and get Tory?
No, it's not. Not at all. And actually, I'm standing up for what I believe in, and people can choose to vote for that. If you added up the Greens' votes or our votes, you wouldn't get the Tories out on the polls that are out there right now. But what you will never see is the change you want to see if you don't start voting for it. The last election was done on tactical voting, and I've heard this in Truro and Falmouth and here, people saying, well, I tactically voted last time and it didn't work. So actually what you're doing is you're skewing the picture, because people then use that information to go, these are how many people support Labour. It's not how many people support Labour. What instead you've got is lots of people who support the Liberal Democrats, who support the Greens, who lent their vote, and now that's misshapen the whole political picture. And people are waking up to that now and going, if you want to see change, if you want to build the change you want to see, you have to vote for it. And it might not happen straight away, but it will happen. I had a hustings recently where an 18-year-old who was voting for the first time cried at the hustings because she said she wanted to vote Green. Her heart said vote Green, and people were telling her she was voting for the Tories. And we need to stop that language. That's not fair and that's not right. People who vote Tory are voting for Tories. It's the fact that they have 50% of people voting for them. That's what wins them their seat, and the fact that we have a broken political system. It's not other people who support other parties. We are not giving anyone else our vote or taking anyone else's or stealing it. Everyone has the right to stand, and individuals have the right to choose who they're voting for. 50% of people vote for the Conservatives, then they get in. I will work really, really hard to take those Tory votes and be a safe home for people who don't support the kind of Tory government that we have right now. And I hope that will make a difference. But what we really need is to change our voting system, which Labour aren't supporting.
Okay. In terms of climate then, I want to talk about your emissions targets. Why choose 2045 as the year for an emissions target when the Home Office commissioned study on the matter says 2050 and people like the Greens, Extinction Rebellion and Greta Thunberg say 2030?
Yeah.
You're just meeting in the middle, aren't you?
Well, so you've already pointed out that there's a lack of kind of reliable information that some people say later, some people say earlier. I think what's clear is we need to do it as early as we responsibly can. And for the Liberal Democrats, that date is 2045. It's supported by environmental groups such as WWF and Friends of the Earth as well. And we've seen with Labour what happened when individuals say, we want 2030, we want 2030. It got passed at their conference. These are not experts saying 2030. These are just individuals going, we've heard it, so that's what we want, 2030. And then the Labour Party have realised they can't do that. And now they've backtracked on that. Whereas we have had people researching it, looking at policy, working with experts, and they've come up with that 2045 date as a date that is achievable and ambitious, because what we're talking about is major change. There's no doubt about it. It has to be major change. That's going to affect people's lives. That's going to affect communities, those who are vulnerable on low incomes. It's going to change the way the world looks around us. So we have to be doing it in a responsible way as well.
Well, that target is legally binding, and it says so in your manifesto.
Yeah.
So what happens if you don't meet that target?
It's a very interesting question, and I don't know the answer to that. That's the truth.
Well, could it see businesses and public sector bodies or even the government be prosecuted?
So, yeah, there certainly is. We have in our manifesto that there will be a general corporate duty to set targets for environmental and human rights issues, but also that any company listed in the UK or the UK Stock Exchange will have to set targets and feedback on how they're meeting those targets that are in line with the Paris Agreement. And we also say that we're going to set a body that is separate to the government, so outside of the government, which I think is really important, because the climate is not a political issue. We have to try and take it out of the hands of parties, if you like, and that their job is to hold companies to account.
You are moving away from the question. What happens if they don't meet those targets?
I'll go back to my initial answer, which was that I don't know. And you can keep asking me, and I'll keep coming back with things that you suggest that might be the case, or things that we consider may be possible outcomes. But I just don't know. I can't answer that right
What
now.
it seems like is that the government is not accountable to its own target. And it's set this legally binding target for everyone else and not itself.
Yeah.
Does anyone in the Lib Dems know what's going to happen?
I will do my best to find out, but I can't answer that right now. But what I can say is that with all things, if a government doesn't meet its promises, the electorate then have a chance to say, no, you haven't met those things. And we know that more than anybody, because it's happened to us. And I think that risk of breaking pledges that we have experienced is exactly why we're setting a target that is reasonable, that we believe is achievable. And actually, it's 2045 is the limit, and we hope to get there sooner than that.
Okay, well, I just finally want to touch on some local issues. So the manifesto makes mention of the Northern Powerhouse, the Midlands Engine, I think it is. Doesn't make too much mention of the South West, not that I've seen. What level of devolution are the Lib Dems supporting? I mean, the Greens are offering a referendum on a Cornish Assembly. Can we see anything like that from the Lib Dems?
Yes. The South West is mentioned. Actually, Cornwall's mentioned specifically a couple of times. When they're talking about the Northern Powerhouse, they were examples of using the strengths of different regions to our advantage. But it does talk about a Cornish Assembly. So the Liberal Democrats would enact legislation that would allow different areas to have self-governance, for example, and they gave the example of a Cornish Assembly. So a Cornish Assembly would only happen if the people in Cornwall wanted it, but the Liberal Democrats support areas that want to have more devolved power. They would want to support that. They know that not every area wants to go down that route, but that some areas do.
Would you measure that for a referendum?
I think so, but again, that's not set out in the manifesto exactly how that would happen. So I would imagine it would have to be a referendum, but I'm just giving you my best view of it.
Thank you very much, Florence.
No problem.